Welcome back everybody to Ranger Auto. Today we are working on our 2007 Cadillac DTS. I've done a video on this about the headlight. So this video is going to go a little differently than what I had planned it to do. You might have seen in the one video I had the fender drop, the bumper drop down. I picked it back up so that it wouldn't form in that fashion, because sometimes plastic, if you leave it in one spot for too long, it'll build creases and stuff in it, and when you go to pick it up, your paint cracks, and then you got to repaint your stuff, and I'm not about that for any reason whatsoever. So today's going to be a removal and an install, but it's going to be a removal of the aftermarket headlight, which has failed, and the install of the OEM headlight, which I just picked up from the dealership. $900 if you're wondering. That's just going to round it up. It might be a little bit more depending on where you're at. The list value on it's $1,100, so that might tell you about how important it is to probably keep your OEM headlight. All right, to get this bumper down, we're going to drop this bolt, and we're going to drop this bolt. You can take the other two bolts out to the front end, and this whole thing will come forward if you need the room. I think we can get it done today with just taking out these two 10mm bolts. And they're only hand tied in because that, like I said, I had the grill up so that it wouldn't hit the floor. So we'll just take our screws out right here real quick, and then we'll pull this bumper back, and then we'll get started getting this headlight out of here. If you want to kind of designate a location on your table or near the car for you to put the bolts, you can do the bolts. Another part of notation is, you notice these bolts are two different lengths. This one is your top bolt, that is your side bolt. Let me explain real quick how that means. Top bolt means it goes in that hole. Side bolt means it goes in that hole. Okay, in case you're trying to figure out what the hell I was talking about. All right, so the bumper should come right off because I didn't put any of the hardware back in the fender. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab our bumper and we'll just scoot it out just ever so gently. All right, so it doesn't want to come out all the way, so let's go ahead and take out the other two bolts here, which are not that bad, but we'll go ahead and those are 10mm, so we'll go ahead and put our 10mm on our driver here. And it's set to on. All right. Get that bolt out of there. Sometimes you might want to kind of pick up. Then it falls through into the dirt, and then you got to hunt around for it. There it is right there. You set your side bolts up in here, because you're going to have other bolts in this car too that look similar, and you'll see here shortly when we get ready to do that. And let me show you the beauty behind this here. Pull that bolt. Now watch. Notice that we had limited room before. Watch this. I can literally put this bumper on. The bumper hits the ground. Be careful. You have electrical right there. That's your ambient temp sensor and your airbag modules. You only want it to look like that anyway, because that way the headlight comes straight out when you pull that inside nut. So while we're talking about it, let's get it done. So your inside nut, it's a 10mm. You can do this one of two ways. You can do it with a 3/8 drive. If you want to take the time to build your extension tree, which we're going to do. That's about what you're going to need to get in there. Then you can use the 10 that we just used on our ratchet to get the bolts out of the top. You can use that to get that nut. Let me show you where the nut resides. Might be able to see it. All right, we're down on the side of the car, as you can tell. Pull this fender well back. It sits right in the back. I don't think I can get my camera in there. You might see it. It's in there. So you're gonna have to pull this fender well back. Some people take the tire off. I'm not doing it that way this time because I want to get this thing done and over with, and taking the tire off means you got to jack it up and headaches ensued and all that good stuff. I can see the nut, but you probably can't. So I'm gonna pop that nut out real quick. I'll bring you back. We'll get the other bolts out and we'll slide this thing off of here. Now keep in mind, it's unplugged already because I was doing power and ground check on it. By the way, the powers and grounds on this car are good. So that means when we put the new headlight in, we should be good to go, but we'll test it before we put the car back together. There's your nut right there. Comes right off. By the way, if you hear wind, I apologize in advance. I'm trying to get this done before the rain hits. This car's been over here for going on 2 weeks now, and I want to get it home. Guy wants to drive it. You know, I don't want to keep him any longer than he has to be. All right, so you're call that the foot bolt. Foot bolt's down there. We'll go ahead and we'll knock it off. All right, there's the foot bolt. There's your top bolt, one of two. And there's two of two, right there, your fender bolt. Now, as far as order of operation, as far as like if you had to put these back in a certain order, I usually go from the bottom up. You can go from the top down, doesn't matter. Either way, the end goal is that you have all of your bolt holes centered like they're supposed to be, so that when you put the bolts in, you don't cross thread them. On this car, it is real easy to cross thread a bolt. So we'll put our headlight bolts here on our mat. If you've got a coffee can or something you want to use, go for it. Like I said, our clip is unhooked because I was doing power and ground check, and I've confirmed that this is bad. I've changed the bulb in it and it didn't light up. And so on an HID bulb setup, you got two possibilities. Either the ballast is bad or the light's bad. There's no in-betweens. This was, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but I put this on for the guy back in fall of last year. After the one that he had in here blew out, it was aftermarket. They sent him a replacement. And, well, see how easy that is to get off of there when you drop the bumper. Now, the only thing you're going to have here is the ballast is going to hang up a little bit on the bottom. There's the ballast right there. So, there's our headlight. As you can see, that's the carnage you leave behind. So let's set our headlight up on our table. I'm going to set it like this, and then we're going to go get our other headlight that we just paid $900 for. We're going to set the two of them together so that you can see the differences, and then I can explain as to why we're changing out the aftermarket light for the OEM light. Because once you see the differences, you'll understand why I made the video about aftermarket headlights. And to reiterate something about that, if it's a headlight for like that Ranger back there, you get just a bucket. That's all you get. You get the lens and the bucket, you supply the headlight. Not a problem with that because it's a halogen bulb. Halogen bulbs are a hell of a lot more forgiving than these HIDs or the LEDs. All right, so this is your original, brand new from GM, headlight assembly for your Cadillac DTS. See, all original. It's got the spots on the headlights for the adjustment of your high and low beam. This is where you change your bulb. This is your ballast. Sits on the bottom of the bulb setup. You got a screw here, and a screw here. They're Torx bits because GM loves their Torx bits. Here's your aftermarket. Completely different setup. Okay, here's your ballast. You have a Phillips screw here, and then you got Phillips screws here and here. Problem is, if you have to replace this ballast, this is where your screws will go on the one you get from the parts store. This is why we're changing it, because this one cannot be changed. It is a one and done. So physically it looks the same as far as the molding goes. Of course, this one here, I think they went a little nuts on the hot glue gun a little bit there on that lens, or that light bulb, but aside from that, and this is the back of it right here. This is your turn signal. Your daytime running light goes down here. Your main headlight is right here. And then there's a couple bumpers on this one that are not even on the new bulbs, or the OEM bulbs, so I'm assuming they're not supposed to be there. And then of course you got your trade number here on the side here. It says D1S, that's your bulb number. And then you've got your codes and everything right there on your lens. And then you have your caution sticker for your headlight. Headlight is mercury filled, of course. HID bulb, it runs off of a mercury charge. So there's your connector that plugs into the car. So we're going to go ahead and get this put on. Excuse my voice today, everybody. Apparently the weather is affecting me. Alright, so install this very expensive bulb on your very expensive car. You have to start off by plugging in your very expensive clip. So, clipped on, snaps on there nice and tight, ready to go. Alright, get the foot behind that weld right there on the frame. Then you want to take your bulb, I'm going to call it a bulb even though it's a headlight assembly. And what you're trying to do is you got this stud down here. You want to get it through that hole right there. So we're going to just kind of get it lined up. Sometimes these slide right in, sometimes they don't. I think this one might be in as soon as I can get the... So let me go ahead and get this locked in there, and then I'll bring it back. We'll tighten it down and keep going. Okay, takes a little bit. You can see there's a couple spots in the body where you can actually look through and aim that stud. But we got the stud in. Make sure that your rubber seal is on the inside. It kind of poked out on me a minute, so I had to pull the top out to where it would form itself back in, and then we're good to go. And then you just kind of push your headlight up like that. And this is where it gets to be a bit of a challenge, because let me show you. To get your bolts to line up properly, you're gonna have to do it like this. You're gonna have to get your hardware somewhere where you can get to it pretty quickly. Take your knee. No, actually we're not going to do that way. We're going to have to do it this way. Pick it up, take your knee and hold it in place. Or we can do it this way. We can put our screw in and then kind of trying to do this one-handed here, and it's just not working for me. So we'll just kind of hold it like that. You can see the screw hole right there, and I'll put the screw in. Or we can do it one more other way. Take your Phillips screwdriver, stick it in the hole. Get your, because this has got a brand new rubber grommet on it, so it's going to be a little bit hard to get down in there. Put your screwdriver down inside your top hole. Start your second hole with your screw. You want to finger tighten it down until it locks onto the threads, and then sometimes you got to put some pressure on it. So you're going to put your, you're going to do what you got to do to get this thing to start. You'll feel it start. Make sure it doesn't go cross-threaded, because like I said earlier, these cars just love the cross-thread. See if I can get that down in that hole right there for you. I think we're going to have to, yeah, I'm going to have to do this off camera, and then I'll bring you back for the foot bolt. Okay, I got these top two bolts in, and it's a two-handed job, so there's no way. I don't have a tripod yet, so I couldn't set the camera up so that I could show it to you. But I'm hoping that changes soon. So just bear with me, folks. Alright, so we got that bottom bolt that needs to go in next. But before we do that, let's go ahead and test our repair. Worst thing you want to do is get a repair done, and then you put the car back together and something's still not right about it. So Okay, like I remember, but like I said before, this driver's side light did not work. We're changing it out from an aftermarket back to the OEM. You can see the side of my Escort sitting right there. Let's see if we got headlights. There's our daytime driving lights. Look at that, folks. We have a headlight. First time all week we got a headlight. So I think our repair works. If you can't see that, I'll bring you around here and I'll show it to you firsthand. Look at that, folks. Diagnostic complete. And with a bad ballast, our headlight is functioning. I'm sure high and low beam work. We're not going to worry about that today. So we can go ahead and shut off our headlights to save our battery, because this car hasn't started in 2 weeks. I have to start it up today and move it, because the customer's going to come pick it up tonight when I let him know it's done. So, repair has been confirmed. Now, don't mind that. That's just the bumper dropping. We'll put our other bolt, our foot bolt, down inside the hole. We're going to put our foot bolt down inside the hole. We're going to try to get it. Always start your bolts by hand. Never start your bolts by tool. That's how you end up with stripped out bolts. That, and you can feel when the bolt grips, and then you can go ahead and zoom it down like this. Zoomy. There we go. That one's done. Okay, our headlight is almost completely installed. Now we have to put our nut on our stud. This is the part that gets interesting, because you can take that nut off and you don't need a swivel. But to put the nut back on and tighten it up, you need a swivel. And you can't do it with the 3/8 drive. So let me show you how you get the nut back on. You're going to have to get your quarter drive 10 deep. So we'll get your 1/4 inch 10 deep. And then I keep my swivels down inside these little pockets in my toolbox, so they don't get all lost. So you're going to put that on there. Now the good thing about this is you can reach your hand up into the fender and put the nut on and tighten it down to the point where you can't tighten it no more by hand. Then you take this little setup that I'm going to make for you. If I can find my extensions. Oh crap, let me see if I can find my extensions. There's one of them. Take your extensions and you build yourself a little device here. And then you take this device with your, there's the other part of it right there. Normally I keep my extensions all connected together in my box, but I've been using them a lot lately, so I haven't done that. That's what you got. Take that with your 1/4 drive ratchet, and this is how you're going to tighten it down. And so that's what we're going to do next. We're going to put our nut on inside our fender. Then after we get that done, I'm going to show you how this bumper goes, this bumper cover goes back up on here, because it's a unique little trick to get this bumper cover back on here. I'm going to see if we can do it this time. So I'll get this nut back on, and I'll bring you back and get this bumper cover on. All right, we got our nut tightened up in there. By the way, you don't have to put He-Man strength on that. Just tighten it up just enough to where it's not going to back off. It's a flange nut, so it's got a little bit of a grip on the end of it when you go to tighten it down. You just don't want it to fall off and rattle around inside your fender. So here comes the fun part. You notice what these bolts look like. That's the head of your bolt. Okay, the knurl part actually locks down inside the bumper, so don't be too concerned about that right now. All right, that's the underside of your fender. It's the same on both sides. So the way this is designed is you'll take your bolt, fit it up inside this hole, and then when everything else is on the top, you're going to push back, and that's going to slide back here and lock into place. The way this is designed, when this locks back into place, you can tighten the nut on that bolt, and you're good to go. And then you get about 1,000,001 different little plastic clips that goes in this fender, this inner fender. So I'm gonna try to do this one-handed. If I can't, you'll understand why, because this is a bit of an undertaking. All right, so let me see if I can get my hand in the right spot. All right, you pick your fender, or pick your bumper cover up like this. You're gonna bring it forward, being mindful to make sure that none of your, because you got the whole car that you're dealing with here, not just one side. So you gotta pick your bumper up. Yeah, I'm gonna have to set it up with both my hands. So I'll bring you back here in just a second when I got this thing in position. Okay, so to get the bumper up, you have to pick it up, and then you have to slide it over to the side a little bit so that it will clear this bracket. So before we put the bolts in the bottom, we need to take care of the top. So to take care of the top, we're going to start with these bolts here on the corners, this one, the one on that side, and then we're going to get the 2 bolts on the inside, and then this part will be done. Then I'll show you down on the fender side what we're doing over there, so that you get a better idea of why you want to keep those bolts in where they are. So let's get our 2 long bolts that we pulled out of our top, and they're going down for good this time. These are your 2 long bolts. So you might have to use your knee, because if you see on our car, it's not quite centered over the bolt hole. So you want to kind of take your knee and you want to kind of hold it in position. Put your bolt down in the hole. And it's always good if you pay attention to what your bolts look like when you get it out of the car, because some of these bolts won't go back in the same hole. So let's say, for example, that's the correct bolt for that area. See how it matches the different other bolts here. This one looks like this bolt and that bolt. GM, for some reason or another, and they do this on all their cars, I've not come across one that hasn't done this yet, they will find a way to differentiate their bolts based on the side of the car or truck or SUV or minivan that you're working on, or box truck if you have a GM box truck. And the reason for that is to alleviate confusion. It's also a way for the technician at the dealership to tell whether or not somebody's been monkeying around with the car, so that they can put that in their report. And I've seen some reports for this, like, well, customer states rattling noise. Upon examination, found somebody was monkeying around with their car. I don't make this stuff up. I've seen it happen. So once you get your bolt started, go ahead and zip them down, nice and easy. That one's in, and we'll zip this one down. Whoop, bounced off there. Didn't mean to do that. All right. So we got those 2 bolts in. We got to put our side bolts in, which, if you remember, they're the short bolts. So we take our monster extension off that we needed to get the foot bolt put in for the headlight. Just go down like that. Like I said, start your bolts by hand. So we'll start this one off in here like this. We'll put our bolt back in here. And then we'll put this one in over here. Get it in about 2 or 3 threads, and then you can zip it in the rest of the way. So we'll go ahead and we'll lock our bolts down. Get this side done next. We'll double check those with a ratchet here in a second. So what you want to do now is take your socket off, your ratcheting tool. Have a hand ratchet nearby, just in case there's a question about like if the car has a history of rattling. Because the air ratchet does, the the battery ratchet does a good job, but in some spots it doesn't quite get all the way in there, so you gotta make sure they're tight. So we'll just kind of put a little bit of a twist on them real quick, make sure that everything's good. Like that. See that? That had a quarter turn left in it. This bolt here you want to be careful with. This bolt here you want to be careful with. That one had a little bit of a turn left in it. This one down here, that one's good. Like I said, you don't need to put a whole lot of torque on these bolts, just enough to hold it down on the car, because you can break these tabs off, or you can snap a bolt head off inside this. Real easy to screw this car up, real easy. All right, so fun part's over with for right now. You're going to need your quarter drive with your extension, not the extension, but you're going to need the long socket. And see, I was smart when I took this apart, because I put all the hardware in the cup tray. See that? We got cup tray parts, and we've got this separated by location. All the stuff I'm picking up out of there now, it's for the fender area. That stuff over there is for the radiator cover, which we're going to be putting on here in a minute. Get this fender area done up real quick. Okay, so you want to set your stuff down. Notice we have 2 nuts on there and 1 bolt head, because the bolt's hanging out inside here. See, this is what I was telling you about, how that gets locked into that little space right there. So all I have to do now is put the nut back on it, zip that up in there. There's another one that goes in here. And if you're wondering how I'm going to get that bolt in there, just like this, let me show you. Just take your hand, set it up in the hole like this, and you just drop the bolt down in there. See where that bolt's sitting right there? And then you take your bolt, line it up with the hole in the fender. Now all I have to do is just pick this up, stick this really long nut right there. That nut goes on that bolt, just like that. Zip it up and call it done. Now, there's no real order in which to do these. If you want to start from the inside first and get the outside second, you can. I find it easier to get the outside done first and then work to the inside, but that's your preference. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera real quick, bring you back, and we'll start putting these clips in this fender well, and then we can go ahead and finish buttoning this car up. Okay, that's what it looks like. Let me see if I can get my camera in there. You see our 2 bumper bolts right there. You can see our, if you look far enough back in there, you can see our ballast from our headlight. That's what it looks like when it's all tightened up. Like I said before, you don't have to He-Man these in there. Now, you might want to roll back a little bit if you're asking yourself how those tighten down without needing a head. The knurled part of the bolt goes into this metal brace right here that's also knurled, and it acts as a lock and it holds it in. So in case you're wondering how that works, that's how you do it. Then you want to push your inner fender back up in here. Now, I didn't make a video about tearing this down, but let me go over this real quickly as far as why you don't have to pull the tire off. Because you can pull your hand back, you can pull this back, it sits inside of a lip, which I can't get a picture of, but there's a lip up in here that this sits inside of. You just push this back and pull back on it, and you can disconnect it from the lip inside the fender. Now, to get the bolt, to get the plugs back in it, because here's your plugs right there. Now, you might have some that tell you where they go. This one's got a little bit of the yellow on it, so it might go like, say, either in this hole or this hole here, or even this hole up here. But regardless of where they go, you want to make sure they're in the up position, as far up as you can go without them coming out of the fastener. You're going to start in this innermost hole right here. And this is going to be where you're going to get your alignment from, because if you line that up, you can see that hole back there, and you put your first push pin in that hole. That's going to line up the rest of the holes. So, well, except for a couple. And we're going to have to, yeah, okay, there we go. So you'll get that first one started. Then you'll come down here and do the bottom corner. Then you'll come up this side and you're all done. Now some cars, they have a skid plate on the bottom. This one does not. If you have a skid plate or a under front cover, as they're called on the SRX, you have provisions for that cover. You've got 2 extra holes in the bottom of your fender well. So make sure you get those bolts in, or if they're screws, because I've had both where they've been screws and I've had them where they were fasteners, make sure you get that tightened up. This car, and we'll take a quick peek underneath here, probably at one time had a cover on it, but then some shop forgot to put it back on. But that's not a problem. It could lead to as to why his ballast failed, because this cover under here keeps the trash out of up here, and with HID bulbs you want to keep them as clean as you possibly can. You see he's got provisions. You probably can see the random plugs down there, the little fasteners there. So this cover came down, probably bent at a 90, fit up in here, and then it had a fastener there, and then a couple more down the line. But like I said, he's been to some shop in the life of this car, and they did some work on the front of it, probably a radiator or, you know, a sensor of some sort, or something that requires this cover to be removed. They didn't put the cover back on. So being that that's the case, oh, we have a little bit of a rubber issue here. Let's fix that for him real quick. He's a good guy. He's a new regular. He came to me starting last year, and I've done some work on this car, and he trusts my work. So let's see if we can get his parts back on there for him. Yep, that one went back in, no problem. This is your rubber skid plate. This is your rubber piece here that keeps your bumper from getting all scratched up when you go into low parking spots. So, being that this starts off with a two-man job, or a two-handed job, and I don't have a tripod, as I've mentioned before, I'm going to get that top right back there put in, and then I'll get this to a point where I can show you how these push clips go back in, and we'll finish this up and get it out of here. Yeah, there it is. Took a little bit. Sometimes you have to pinch the ends of these clips. I'll show you these clips. Sometimes you got to pinch those ends in a little bit for them to go into the hole. They'll go in. And then that one made an audible snap to it. So let's see if we could put the rest of these in, if they make an audible snap too. Get them all the way in, get them in as far as you can, and then you take your thumb and you push. Well, that one didn't really snap. That one just, you heard fender noise. Sometimes you got to pull these back. You pull those back like that, and then you squeeze the middle of them. Then you can put them in the hole like that. Put them in there like that. Then you take your thumb and you snap them. Now, a word of caution when you're doing these push pins. If, for some reason, these break off, being that these are fairly cheap and quite common to get, you can go to Harbor Freight and get a kit for like $9, or you can go to O'Reilly, not a sponsor, and you can get some of these for like $4.99 or whatever it is now. Just change them. Just change them. If they fight you, they don't want to go back in, like these are going in pretty easy, so I wouldn't worry about it. Just change them out. No problem. If you lose one or you break one, just change them, because they're not that big of a deal, because all they do is they just hold the plastic to the metal, or plastic to plastic in this case. And that's it. Your fender well area is done. So we're going to keep rolling here, and I'm going to show you a few things, and then we're going to call the customer off camera and tell him come get his ride and pay me my money. No, not really. He's a good guy. He does what he has to do. If you didn't know this, if you're new to Cadillac, this is how you open your trunk. Push that button. Now, I'm not going to show you what's in his trunk, but what I have to get out of here is his radiator cover. So we're going to aim the camera down to protect his privacy. We're going to get our radiator cover out. Close his trunk. This is your radiator cover. This part that I'm hanging on to, that's for your upper radiator hose to sit. In case you're wondering what that was for, or if you've tried to put these on and had a hard time getting them back on. So here's what we're going to do. Set your cover down. Don't put any clips in it right now. You want to reach down behind here, pick up your radiator hose, lock it into this space right here, and as you can see, when you do that, all your holes line up. Now this car is missing some hardware, but I have enough original hardware that I had to go buy from GM to fix it, because when I got it the first time, he brought it from another shop, and they didn't have any of the pins in there. So we're going to get our pins out of our cup holder right here, and I'm going to show you what a GM original pin looks like for this car. In case you buy one and it's got some goofy looking things and you're like, well, that don't look original. It probably isn't. All right, so we're going to put our non-original. This is our non-original. That goes in this bottom corner here on this car. It could go anywhere you want it to. That's just to hold it in place. These are your GM original push clips. These are what they look like when they've been triggered. To reset these clips, you take your finger, you take your thumb, and you push on them. You're going to push all the way through till the top pops up. See that? See how that top's popped up? Then you're going to put it in a hole. And say, for example, I want it to go in this hole right here. So we're going to set that down inside that hole right there. We're not going to push it down just yet, because we got to get the other ones in their holes too. So I put this one in this upper hole. And the reason I'm doing these holes and not the end holes is because these holes here have weight on them from your radiator hose, so you don't want this cover to break. So you snap your line up there. There you go. Put that down in this hole here, like that. Now, to activate these, you just push them down, like that, and they will snap. That's it. To deactivate one of these, you can use a Phillips screwdriver or a pick. I'm going to show you the Phillips screwdriver method of how these disconnect themselves. And you just take your push down, disengages it, and then you can pop it up and out. Just like that. That's how those come apart. Then you push on the end. You want your end to look like that. Push all the way up. That comes out like that. And that goes back down in the hole, and then you snap it down in. So that's it. We are done. We are done. That is how you change a headlight assembly on a 2007 Cadillac DTS. Before we go, I just want to say one last thing. When you buy aftermarket headlights, there's two types. There's the composite type, which is what this was, and then there's the type you have to build. If you're fortunate enough to put HID lights in your vehicle and you get the build kit, make sure you get 2 extra ballasts, one for each side. That way, if one fails, you got a backup. I don't know how cost effective that would be, but that's how I would go about it if you're insistent on having HID headlights. On this car, however, because these lights, I don't know who the manufacturer is, they didn't give him an option for replacement ballast. Otherwise, we could have reused this headlight. But as you can see, there's a whole lot of differences between the OEM and the original equipment. Enough to where I asked the customer to pull the trigger, and that's what we did. And I'll show you another thing too. Let me see it. You see the profile of the car here. That one is an aftermarket headlight. That one is an OEM. Unless you know what to look for, you can't tell the difference between the two. That one's just a little bit brighter because it's brand new. That one, I don't know, probably been in there a year or two. I don't know when he originally did this. But he's gonna have to, one day that light will blow out. And he's already told me that we're gonna have to do this again on the passenger side. So if that happens, I'll bring you in. We'll do the same thing on the passenger side that we did on the driver's side. Only in case there's differences. I don't suspect there to be, but there could be differences. We'll do another video on it. So this has been another day in Ranger Auto, and we'll see you next time.